We'll be hybrid, we'll burst into the clouds, we will scale to petabytes. If you think about it, the root of all of this comes down to how you are going to manage your storage and data across the cloud, across on-premise, across silos, how you're going to secure your data and storage, right? So because eventually everybody likes the cloud, but then the final question of the CIO is going to be, hey, how do I get my data across? And if I don't like your cloud, how do I get my data back, right? So I'll try and answer that. And to do that, we'll also kind of walk through the storage services, the data services available from Amazon specifically. And then we'll try and also just gaze into the crystal ball and see what new storage services I think will come up from the cloud providers. Right, so what are the trends, right? I mean, we all know that these are trends that are already happening in some way or another. Some are accelerating, some will accelerate further, right? Data is exploding, no doubt about it, right? Enterprise cloud adoption is expanding at a very frantic pace. Hybrid cloud environments are heavily being explored. Some are being set up, but definitely it will accelerate. Customers are experimenting with cloud bursting and how they can leverage the cloud only if they have less capacity on premise, right? Connectivity, well, that's a given, right? We have iCloud, Samsung Cloud. I'm sure they are building very huge data centers, or they've already built very, very huge data centers to take care of the millions and billions of smartphones and the data from those, right? And the day isn't far. It already, your Samsung Cloud connects your TV, your Samsung mobiles, your tablets, and I'm sure that will go on to each and every device that exists in this world probably, right? Next is bring your own device, right? And then that's kind of kicked off already. How do you manage the data with that, right? How do you secure your cloud storage, or how do you secure storage across 5, 10, 15 silos in general? So in traditional IT, what traditionally the offerings that have been available have been, using memory, using SAN, using NAS boxes, using databases, using direct attached storage and offline archival into tapes, right? The benefits and the trade-offs, the cost-benefit trade-offs have been very well understood over a period of the last 20, 30, 40 years, right? Some of the choices that are available in the cloud are a bit different, right, than what was traditionally available to you. Therefore, it is that slight chasm that is being crossed as we speak. And we'll take a look at what the offerings across the chasm are, right? So when it comes to, let's say, AWS's cloud offerings, cloud storage offerings, this is what they have as of today. And then they keep on accelerating. So you have elastic block storage, ephemeral storage, S3, SQS, SimpleDB, DynamoDB, RDS, Elasticache, and Storage Gateway. Right. So that's an interesting set of services that they have built up in about 6-7 years. Right. So we'll go through some of that as we speak. The first interesting thing is all of the services are available in 7 to 8 data centers across 4 or 5 continents. Right. That's the interesting part. I mean, if you wanted to store data across 4 or 5 continents earlier, it was probably impossible, right? Or very, very expensive to do that. You would have to go in and buy data center space, buy co-located space, buy the boxes, hire admins to set them up, or outsource the setup of those boxes, set up the software, buy the software licenses. Expensive, right? Today, it is very much possible to kind of go in and start using storage across 7 to 8 data centers without any upfront costs, without any licensing headaches, right? Which is kind of revolutionary, right? So let's look at the disk storage that is available from AWS, right? Firstly, what you have are the ephemeral disks. Now these disks have non-persistent storage, and this storage basically comes when you start a server or an instance on EC2, it has an ephemeral disk. If you shut down that instance, the storage is gone. Okay, so it's very cheap. It comes with the instance, you use it. When you're using the instance, it's scratch storage, right? Don't store anything persistent, anything that you would need in it, but you can kind of use it for any calculations, any scratch storage, any logs, /var, /temp kind of storage, which can also be pretty large in most scenarios. So it's a typical web scale concept, right? It's a new concept that people aren't really used to yet, but It's in use in all the web scale companies. So the Netflixes, the Zyngas of the world, whenever they have used AWS, they have used ephemeral disks and the storage of ephemeral disks very, very nicely. The more, what do you say, similar concept to traditional hard drives is elastic block storage, right, which is EBS in short. So this is just like a hard drive. The only thing is you can manage this hard drive through APIs and software. So there are independent volumes from 1 GB to 1 terabyte that you can provision through APIs and can attach to any instance and any server within EC2, right? So potentially, let's say you have an app server to which you have attached a database. The app server goes down, you don't really worry about it. Another app server comes up, the EBS on which you have a database, you attach it to the new app server, right? So it's pretty seamless. They are persistent. The instances or the servers that are EBS backed or have EBS for the root disk, they can be shut down, rebooted, restarted, just like your traditional servers, right? So this is the, so any server or instance that you start in EC2, you can either have an ephemeral backed instance store in server, or you can have a EBS backed instance. Another thing is you can attach multiple volumes, right? If you need 30 terabytes with your server, you can attach 30 volumes to that server, and you'll get 30 terabytes that you need. Currently, EBS does not offer shared kind of storage, right? So one volume can only be attached to one instance. You cannot attach one volume to 2 instances and use it in a shared manner. Very interesting fact is it offers instant snapshotting capabilities, and these are incremental snapshots. So if you have a 10 GB database and you change 500 MB within it, and when you snapshot it for backups, a backup of 500 GB gets 500 MB gets created. Okay, so it's incremental. So you basically can take incremental snapshots every 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, whatever is relevant for you, right, and keep them around very cheaply, right? You can use multiple EBS disks in RAID configurations for better performance. So basically in AWS or probably in most clouds, all of the storage that is available is network attached storage, right? Therefore, if suddenly Netflix starts 10,000 instances and starts hitting them with large I/O, you as a small user or even a relatively small user, your performance will start getting affected in a big way, right? So one of the ways to manage this is to have, let's say, 5 EBS disks in some RAID configuration, let's say striped RAID configuration, because of which you will get 5 times the I/O operations that you would with just one disk, right? Larger EBS disks have given us more performance whenever we have benchmarked, and most customers have seen that. So instead of, if you really need the performance, then instead of allocating, let's say, a 10 GB disk, you should allocate a 100 GB or 1 terabyte disk if you really need the performance, right? You should set up the snapshotting schedules. So some customers snapshot every 3 hours and maintain the last 10 snapshots. Some customers are comfortable snapshotting and storing backups every week, right? So whatever is your schedule, you must set that up so that you don't have a surprise and lose your data on the cloud, right? It is critical to test the restores, right? Because for example, if you are using a file system like ext2 or ext3 and you are taking a snapshot, the snapshots may not be consistent, okay? You would have to use a file system or a database that can help you create consistent backups. Okay, so for example, you can use something like XFS or MongoDB or MySQL, which can kind of lock down the storage subsystem, the file system or the database. Then you take the snapshot and then you unfreeze the storage subsystem, right? Therefore, it's critical to test your restore procedures. S3, I believe most of us have heard a lot about it over the last 1.5 days. It is HTTP scalable storage. It stores 3 copies of your data within the same cost. 2 copies are stored in one data center. Another copy is stored in physically disparate data center, probably across the continent, right? Therefore, it is able to give you 9 nines of durability and 2 nines of availability, right? Which is pretty good at the cost it comes in. But it is not like a file system. Okay, many people try and confuse it with a file system. It is not like a file system. A bucket is what corresponds to a folder, and an object is what corresponds to a file. And all you can do is you can create a bucket and store millions or billions of objects within it, but you cannot create a folder within a folder. Okay, so in essence you have to use it differently than you have been using your file systems, right? Now buckets can be created in any region, right? So for example, if all your customers are in Europe, you should create a bucket in Europe, you should store your objects in Europe so that your customers have the lowest latency possible. Similarly, there could be regulatory requirements, right? You might, an enterprise may require certain data to be stored in the US and certain data to be stored in Europe, in which case your application should accordingly create a bucket in these two regions and put the appropriate data in the appropriate region, right? They also offer something called reduced redundancy storage, which is a cheaper but slightly less durable storage. So if you have some non-critical data in terabytes, petabytes that you want to store on a temporary basis, right, it is better to use reduced redundancy storage than S3 and get about 20-30% price savings. Whenever you use S3, you should use it and access it with multiple threads, multiple apps, multiple clients, and that is when you will see the real benefits of S3, right? Because you have to do nothing to scale it. You just put your data out there, you write a, let's say, mobile app, 10 million people start playing with that mobile app, doesn't matter. S3 will take care of all the load that is being generated, right? So for example, for one of our customers, the work we have done, we were easily able to test like 50,000 APIs per second. Right? I mean, that's a lot. If you wanted to set that up yourself by writing an application yourself, a storage application yourself, it would be very tough to do, right? And people have reported, using much higher loads than this as well. You have to be careful when you put your data in, because S3 as such does not do anything with the data. You just send it a byte stream, it stores it, and nothing more, right? So you have to be careful, encrypt the data, compress the data as per your requirements before you upload it, right? Recently they have added one feature which will do server-side encryption, so your clients don't have to spend the CPU cycles to encrypt the data. But then, yeah, some customers may want to encrypt it at the client side only. If that is not a requirement, then you can just leverage S3's server-side encryption also. If you really need a file system like layout, it is possible to emulate it with something called delimiters within S3, with which it will be possible to create a file system like hierarchy, though it won't be a true file system. Okay, it is integrated with their content delivery system. There are many enterprise customers who have the requirements like, we need to put in 100 terabytes, 200 terabytes, or even 50 terabytes of data into S3, right? Just putting that data across the internet into the cloud will take days, weeks in some cases, right? So Amazon came up with a very simple feature which will allow you to send them disks, JBODs, SAN arrays, NAS arrays through FedEx or whatever, right? They'll plug it into the cloud, they'll copy your data, they'll copy the data into your EBS disks or S3, and you're done, right? Of course, this feature will be used by the very large customers, of course, but it's a very interesting feature, right? Enabling enterprises to come onto the cloud in an easy way. Pricing tiers, for example, for the first 10 terabytes, you would be charged 12 cents per GB per month. But if you're storing, let's say, 500 terabytes, then you would have to pay only like 6 cents per GB per month. So you are getting about 30, 40, 50, maybe 60% savings if you are, a really large customer. Amazon over the period of time has been adding more and more storage management features as well, and I'm sure they'll keep on banging at it, right? So one of the very interesting features has been you can set a time to live, right? You upload a movie, you want to only show that movie for 3 months, or you upload a video, you only want to put that video up on S3 for 3 months. You can give a time to live, right, when you upload it, and automatically after 3 months Amazon will take care of deleting it, right? So all the coding and scheduling that you would have to do in your application can be automated by taking Amazon's help, right, with this particular feature. And I think it's enough said when you say that there are 1 trillion objects in S3 today, and they're growing like 100% every 2, 3, 4 months since the last whatever number of years, right? That's a crazy number of objects to be stored in one object storage system from one provider, right? And I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. So if you were to use S3, or for that matter any cloud object-based system, you would want to protect the data, right? You would have to put in some user management, you would have to put in some access control mechanisms. So Amazon provides you 4 access control mechanisms to manage your S3 storage. right? So first is identity and access management, which is sort of Active Directory for AWS, right, or LDAP for AWS. Then you have access control lists, which you can store on individual objects, right? So if you are in a company, you want to share a video with a certain team, then you can put in an access control rule on it, which says that this video will only be accessed by so and so members of your team, right? You can set bucket policies where you can add and deny very fine-grained permissions, whether on a bucket or an object, right? Similarly, you can also, if you want to put up something on your website, but you want to ensure that after 24 hours or 1 month, nobody should be able to access it, then you can create something called as a query string authentication and give it a time to live of whatever, 24 hours, 30 days, and automatically after that period in time, that link will stop being accessible, right? Larger enterprises, even smaller ones, want to analyze and audit who is accessing the data, from where is the data being accessed, right? So it is possible to take the access logs from S3 and log all of them, right, which can then be used for auditing and analysis, right? So if I want to see how many people from Asia were accessing my files, how many people from Europe were accessing my files, or why did I get 10,000 requests per second from a server in Kazakhstan, right? So you can do, if somebody is trying to hack your and get access to your storage, you can find out all of that. SimpleDB is a NoSQL, no relational data store that is offered as a web service. So for example, you have a billion files that you want to manage in a backup service that you are creating on S3, right? You should store all those files in S3, but to store the names of the files, the metadata of the files, you could use something like SimpleDB, right? So potentially you can just go in and put key pairs within SimpleDB, right? Millions of them, billions of them, doesn't matter. And it will keep indexing them in the backend. It will keep indexing everything in the backend. So when you make a query, all your data will always be indexed, right? So you can just go on dumping metadata information, file names, etc., whatever you need. And at the last moment when you need it, just query it. It will automatically be indexed. Everything will be indexed, right? If you want to do this with a typical SQL database, you would have to invest a ton of money. To get performance, you will have to invest a further ton of money, right? So here is a very simple service that allows you to dump in key pairs, query anything, right? So again, it's a revolutionary in a way. This came like 5 years back, 4 years back, at which point in time it was truly revolutionary. Now we have more databases that do something similar. Again, it is schema-less, so you can keep on changing the schema, right? Or you can keep on adding new data and then randomly index the new columns that you have put in, right? So it's schema-less. You don't need to worry that my schema will change. You don't need to worry about migrating from data from one schema to another and things like that. Amazon took it a notch further and came up with something called DynamoDB. A DynamoDB is a NoSQL database service that's backed by solid state disks. Now solid state disks is another revolution in itself, right, which is cutting down on the latency times that are required to access the hard drives with spindles, right? So what DynamoDB allows you to do is leverage the speed, the low latencies of SSDs in the cloud, right? So you can think of it as a NoSQL data store backed by SSDs, giving you very low latency. Again, DynamoDB provides indexing for you. It provides integration with Amazon's Hadoop service, which is called Elastic MapReduce. So they are seeing great adoption for DynamoDB over the last few months that they have released it. This is another great feature that they came up with, whereby they actually went in and put physical lease lines between co-located data centers or customers' data centers into Amazon's data centers itself, right? So now you can pay for and get a 1 Gbps or a 10 Gbps lease line between Amazon data centers and your data center, or you can co-locate in a data center that has direct connectivity with Amazon data center. In essence, this is allowing you to do excellent fast communication and excellent network performance between your on-premise environment and the cloud environment, thereby actually enabling hybrid environments, cloud bursting and those kind of scenarios, right? It will also take care of a lot of regulatory scenarios, and you don't actually have to incur the hops of going from a public internet to the Amazon cloud. Of course, this service is not available everywhere, but currently it's still available in US, Singapore, Tokyo, London, but not in all regions, of course. So this is again another very interesting service that they came up with, which is a storage gateway. So what you can do is you can download a virtual appliance, install it on your VMware environment, and most enterprises will of course have a VMware environment. And once you have done that, you can just assign it a few volumes, mount them as iSCSI mount points on your storage, on your application servers, database servers, and start using those iSCSI mount points, right? And this storage gateway will by itself keep mirroring or copying your data from on-premise into the cloud, right? So in the scenario when your data center goes down, your application server goes down, there is no issue. The data is already mirrored onto the cloud, right? You can just spin up servers on the cloud and start using the data in the cloud, right? So you are able to take care of disaster recovery scenarios, right? And you don't have to worry about security because the data is copied over SSL, right? So the over the wire communication is very, very safe. When it is stored on Amazon S3, it is encrypted, right? So you can have server side encryption, which will again take care of any security concerns that you may have. The other thing is it offers you low latency access on premise, so you are not taking any hit for performance, right? And there is an asynchronous upload to S3 as well. Now it is stored on S3 as an EBS snapshot. So whenever you actually want to exercise the disaster recovery scenario, you can create a volume from the EBS snapshot, attach that volume to an EC2 instance, start using your application in the cloud, right? So earlier when we used to say, move to the cloud, and how do you move to the cloud? This is kind of enabling it a notch further, right? Of course, you can also restore it on premise, right? You say a fire in a data center, you can restore it back on premise also. It's not necessary that you restore it in the cloud if you don't want to. Now couple this with Direct Connect, right? Use Direct Connect, use storage gateway over very high network performant lease line. You are able to sync, mirror your data to the cloud, right? In the near future, Amazon is also going to come up with a caching appliance, right? Which will, let's say, if you need 100 GB of storage or 100 terabytes of storage, Amazon will keep the 50 GB on the cloud and only 50 GB on premise, and it will kind of act as a hierarchical storage management, fetching the data that you are accessing right now and keeping the rest in the cloud, right? So you can kind of call it, thin provisioning, and kind of call it hierarchical storage management, right? Right, so this is a diagrammatic representation of how the AWS storage gateway works, right? So these are iSCSI mount points. iSCSI is of course one of a very popular protocols of using storage on the cloud, right? In your local data center, and that is being extended, to sync to the cloud now. So very quick overview before we move on to talking about predictions. S3 you would store for static objects, snapshots. So actually I'll just skip this since we seem to be out of time. So what are the predictions from the trends that we are seeing in how storage is evolving on the cloud, right? Distributed storage is going to be big, really big, and you can see that is the reason probably why Red Hat bought Gluster, which is a distributed file system, right? So what you would essentially want to do is use a distributed or a network file system to manage data across various clouds and your various on-premise deployments, right? So for example, Gluster, which is now called Red Hat Virtual Storage Appliance, allows you to aggregate multiple EBS disks on various EC2 servers and create a single namespace file system that can span billions of files, millions of files, terabytes and maybe petabytes of data, right? Lusher, another distributed file system, will be able to do the same, and you can actually create a distributed file system over the wide area network, right? So you can have 5 terabytes in your on-premise environment, you can have 5 terabytes on Amazon cloud and maybe 4 terabytes on another cloud, all managed in a single namespace file system. These file systems are still evolving, and maybe newer ones will come in, but replication, backups across silos, policies, audits, all of that will be implemented within the file system itself and managed with cloud intelligence, right? So there will be intelligence within these file systems to manage the silos and locations, right? Now these file systems are already deployed in environments where they're using petabytes of storage, billions of objects, so on and so forth, right? So they will get scaled further over the next few years to exabytes and I guess eventually zettabytes. Now this is a definite trend. I see it happening more and more, right? Integrated storage. Amazon Elastic MapReduce is a hosted Hadoop framework. It already integrates with S3. You can make it point to S3, pick out the data, do the analysis, put the data back on S3. Similarly, it can work with DynamoDB, right? You can push and pull data back from S3 into EMR, from DynamoDB into EMR, and vice versa. An S3 bucket can today be just marked as an RRS storage, and Amazon will take care in the backend to put that data into low reliability storage and so on and so forth. EBS snapshots are stored on S3. Now this is a trend towards integrating various storage offerings, right? Now earlier in the on-premise data center, you used to have a NAS box, SAN box, Oracle box, etc. Manage it separately. You can't automatically copy storage and then data from box A to box B, etc. Here it's just integrated. And come to think of it, if there really will be petabytes of data to be managed, can you actually move it over, right? Because moving it over will take hours, days. That's not practical, right? Things should get integrated further and further, and we are seeing that already, and I'm sure that will accelerate much further, right? Performance, right? I think Neeraj hit the nail on the head when he said that performance is a critical thing on the cloud, right? So AWS, for example, has added DynamoDB, which is backed by SSDs, better performance. AWS offers something called cluster compute instances, which are which have GPUs, better networks, and the storage is faster because of the fact that the network is more fat, right? That will give you excellent performance. In some days, you can definitely expect to see SSD as a service. I believe some cloud vendor already has come up with actual SSDs attached to your instances that you can buy on a per hour basis, right? And I'm sure there will be more high performance options for storage on the Amazon cloud. So actually today there is a startup called Zadara Storage which does have this, right? So what you can do is you can go in and buy a virtual private storage array, right? Which will be your private SAN, but it will be in AWS or Rackspace or other clouds. There you can actually select the type of drive you want. Do you want a SSD? Do you want a 7000 RPM SATA disk? Do you want a 15,000 RPM SATA disk? Do you want a SAS disk? What type of RAID level do you want, right? So now you are able to get not just raw storage, but you are able to get intelligent storage. You are able to pick and choose, right? So you can keep some data on 7000 RPM disks, and that will be cheaper. You can keep some data on 15,000 RPM disks, that will be more expensive, right? So you're seeing earlier you had 2 or 3 hierarchies, now there are 10 hierarchies, right? 10 levels in the hierarchy that you can manage as per the costs and the importance of your data. Now these are pure predictions. There is no trend or no service today that exists on these lines, but I'm sure there will be, right? Long-term archival. So if you think about it, anything in a data center that sucks today is more expensive today, takes a lot of time to provision today. CEOs, CTOs have to wait on CIOs for months to get. All of that is going to become a service slowly, right? Long-term archival is an obvious. If there are trillion objects on S3, if there are petabytes and petabytes of data on S3 and EBS or in general in the cloud, the next logical step is to archive it for a long term, right? Already there are compliance issues with having to store data for 10 years, 20 years. When you actually have petabytes, zettabytes, exabytes of data, it's obvious that somebody is going to come up with a service that offers long-term archival on a very cheap basis. E-discovery of your cloud-based data. You have a petabyte of data, do you download it for e-discovery? Of course not, right? Some cloud has to offer the capability to search and e-discover your data, right? So come to think of it, AWS already offers a service called Elasticsearch that you can use to implement searching. I'm guessing it wouldn't be a long time for them to plug the two and offer e-discovery or search as a service for all your data in the cloud, right? Again, as Neeraj pointed out, SLA, reliability, performance based pricing. So if you want 2x the performance that you get normally, pay 1.5 times, right? If you really want so and so SLA, pay more. So you're able to kind of get various levels of offerings, not just for storage, I believe, even for CPU and other offerings. You will get services related to storing and managing unstructured data, right? Whatever we have mentioned right now was block-based storage, object-based storage, but what about unstructured data? Can I just go in dumping text files and expect to search it in an intelligent way as a service, right? So there are small startups doing this already, but I mean the very large players offering very mature offerings that do these kind of things. How about actually replicating raw disk volumes from on-premise into the cloud or vice versa? providing an instant DR capability. What if Amazon offered you a DR capability which keeps syncing all the volumes of a server into the cloud? When the server goes down, that just starts working. You don't have to do anything. The downtime is few seconds, or I mean, the loss in performance would be for a few seconds, right? Not impossible. I think in a few years, if not a few months, we should see most of these things coming in. Great, and a shameless plug that we are hiring. And thanks a lot. I would like to take any questions.
See, if I have to back up, let's say about 5 TB of data on the cloud, now I still find it very, very expensive compared to having even 5 1 TB hard disks, or maybe 2 sets of 5 1 TB hard disks. So 2 sets of 5 1 TB hard disks will cost me something like 50,000 rupees.
Absolutely.
A one-time investment,
Yep.
as against, I think you said something like it will cost me about $600 per month.
Yes.
In
Right. When we do the costing, we should calculate the electricity that you will need, the cost of losing the data, whether you can match the reliability and availability of what these providers will give you. If after the administrator cost, the time it will take to get these hard disks and put them together as a storage solution, right? If take all that into consideration, then it is still possible that you will save money by doing it yourself, right? But currently you would think that the gap is this much in terms of costing. Maybe it is only this much, right? And then you can do a cost benefit analysis that should you be paying more to get whatever extra things you get on the cloud, right? I mean, 9 nines of reliability is tough to match.
No, I understand if it is live data that I have to use continuously, but if it is just for backup, I don't need at all. I just want to keep an archive and then
I think clouds will come up with long-term archival solutions which will be much cheaper. I know, maybe like if you could do it in $200 a month, then you would not want the hassle of doing it as well. There are already other clouds who are doing it, but I'm sure the Rackspaces, Amazon, the Microsofts of the world will also come up with cheap solutions for long-term archival, which will take care of the price points that you're talking about.
How easy or difficult?
Sorry? Yeah.
This is Lakshmikant. How easy or difficult is it to get the data out of Amazon?
It's depends. Which are you talking about? S3? Are you talking about EBS?
No, say 3 years down the line, I want to move to some other storage data center.
Right. So if your data is stored on S3, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But yes, you would need to worry about mapping the ACLs, the access control lists, onto the new storage that you are using. If you are using DynamoDB, you would have to remodel to a different data store. If you are using EBS, you could just copy it to a different file system. So it kind of depends on what you are using, right? If you're using EBS or S3, I wouldn't be that worried. If you start using DynamoDB, Elastic Cache, and the other NoSQL offerings that they have, then yes, there would be effort involved in migrating it. Maybe some minor amount of re-architecture as well. Okay, we can take the other questions offline, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, sir. Now, on behalf of UBM, I would like to present a small memento as a token of appreciation.